Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The rain fell in soft, silvery curtains over the towers of Hogwarts, whispering against stone that had stood for 1,000 years. The war was over, the Dark Lord was gone, yet in the hush that followed victory, the old castle seemed to breathe with secrets again. Professor Neville Longbottom stood upon the ramparts, his cloak heavy with rain, gazing across the mist-shrouded grounds. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and moss. Down below, the greenhouses glimmered faintly with light, and beyond them, the forbidden forest brooded beneath the storm. The castle was quiet, too quiet. Most of the students had gone home for the summer, and only a handful of professors remained behind to repair the damage left by battle. Walls had been mended, shattered windows replaced, and ghosts had begun to haunt once more the halls they'd fled from when the fighting raged. Yet something still lingered. A presence, a whisper. Neville felt it first in the great hall. He'd gone there one night to clear rubble and sort through the relics salvaged from the ruins. The great banners of the 4 houses, Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff, hung limp in the damp air. The long tables were gone, and the enchanted ceiling was dull, mirroring the gray clouds above. He was sorting through a pile of broken wood when he heard it, a voice, soft, dry, and strange, like parchment sighing in a breeze. Another of Gryffindor's lions. Neville froze. His wand leapt to his hand instinctively. "Who's there?" he called. The voice chuckled, low, creaky, and amused. "Still brave, are they? Still bold enough to challenge the unseen?" Neville turned toward the headmaster's dais, and there, resting upon the stool that had survived the battle untouched, lay the Sorting Hat. Its brim twitched faintly, and one corner curled like a smile. "Blimey," Neville muttered, "you're still alive." "Alive?" said the hat. "That's one word for it." Neville approached cautiously. "You're talking to me again? I thought you only spoke during sortings." The hat's voice dropped, almost conspiratorial. "Times have changed. Magic stirs in these stones again. Old magic. Forgotten magic." Neville frowned. "What do you mean?" But the hat did not answer directly. Instead, it hummed, softly, hauntingly, and whispered something that made Neville's skin prickle. "He comes. The bound one stirs. Tell them that Godric's betrayer wakes." The words faded into silence. The hat slumped motionless once more, as though nothing had happened. For several minutes, Neville stood there, listening to the rain against the enchanted ceiling. He half expected Peeves to jump out laughing, but no such trick came. Only the hat, quiet and still. That night, Neville went to Hermione Granger. She was staying at the castle as well, working tirelessly to restore Hogwarts library and uncover the enchantments that had protected it for centuries. When Neville told her what he'd heard, her eyes sharpened in that way they always did when a mystery took hold of her mind. "Godric's betrayer," she repeated. "That's not a name I've ever seen in the Founder's records." Neville shook his head. "Nor I." But the hat seemed frightened, or maybe not frightened, warning me. Hermione frowned thoughtfully. "The Sorting Hat was made by all 4 founders, right? Gryffindor placed his own intelligence in it, his magical essence even. Maybe there's something inside it beyond what we understand. Like a ghost? Perhaps, or a memory. But if it's speaking of betrayal, that suggests someone turned against the founders, someone erased from history. The two of them pored over old manuscripts for days. The names of the founders appeared often. Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin, but nowhere was there mention of any fifth. No betrayer, no bound one. It was only on the fourth night, as lightning flickered over the Black Lake, that they were joined by the new Hogwarts archivist, a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark hair streaked with silver, who introduced himself as Sir Alaric Storm. He bowed courteously. "You are investigating whispers of a name long cursed," he said in a low, accented voice. "Perhaps I can help." Hermione eyed him curiously. "You've heard of it?" Alaric nodded. "In my homeland, across the narrow sea, we speak of a sorcerer who sought to bind the spirits of others to his will. They called him Ravencourt the Bound." Neville felt a chill. The hat said, "The Bound One." "Then you are in grave danger," Alaric said, "for if that name is spoken again in this place, his spirit stirs. And if it was sealed once within an artifact of power—" He glanced toward the Sorting Hat, now resting quietly atop the dais. "Then the seal may be weakening." Hermione's expression hardened. "We need to know who sealed him and why." Neville nodded grimly. "And before whatever's inside that hat decides to come out." Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains. The torches flickered. And for a brief moment, Neville could have sworn the hat's brim lifted again, not in speech this time, but in a silent smile. The whisper of ancient magic crept through the stones of Hogwarts once more, as though the castle itself had begun to remember, and in that memory something old began to wake. The days that followed were heavy with rain and restless dreams. Hogwarts seemed to brood beneath the gray skies, its corridors echoing with the distant murmur of storms that refused to pass. The castle had always been alive in its own way. Walls that whispered, staircases that moved of their own accord. But now Neville felt something deeper, stirring in the stones. It was not mischief. It was not joy. It was memory. Each night he dreamt of the hat. It sat upon the stool in the great hall, motionless and empty-eyed, until suddenly it spoke his name. Not aloud, but inside his mind, like a thought that was not his own. And behind the hat, shadows gathered. 4 figures cloaked in light and fire, their faces veiled, their voices a storm of old tongues. Then the hat would open wider and wider until it became a dark pit that swallowed them all. When Neville awoke from such dreams, his scarred hands trembled, and he found his wand already in his grasp. On the 5th morning, Hermione sent word for him to come to the library's restricted wing. He arrived to find scrolls scattered across the tables, a faint blue glow hanging in the air, where her wand hovered above a tattered volume bound in dragonhide. "I found something," she said quickly without looking up. "A record from the Founder's time, one that wasn't meant to survive." Neville leaned over the parchment. The writing was faded, but Hermione had cast a revealing charm that made the ink shimmer faintly. At the top of the page was a crest, 4 animals circling a single star. Beneath it the words, "On the binding of Ravencourt, once of Gryffindor's circle." Neville frowned. "He was one of Gryffindor's students?" Hermione nodded. "More than that. It says here he was one of Godric's own apprentices, brilliant but dangerous. He believed the founders' greatest flaw was their division. 4 houses, 4 virtues, 4 ways of thinking. He thought that made the school weak. Division is what gives Hogwarts balance, Neville murmured. Exactly. But Ravencourt believed unity could be achieved only if all minds served one will, his. He began experimenting with something called soul weaving, magic that could bind the essence of a person into another's mind. The founders tried to stop him, but he had already learned too much. Neville's heart sank. And that's when they sealed him inside the hat. Hermione nodded slowly. The hat was made with fragments of each founder's mind. It was a vessel, an artifact capable of thought. They trapped him there, binding his soul within the same enchantments that gave the hat its voice. Neville stared at the worn brim that peeked from its perch in the corner of the room. It looked harmless enough, just a bit of enchanted cloth and old thread, but now he saw it differently, a prison disguised as tradition. Hermione's expression darkened. The seal was never meant to last forever. The founders bound him with their combined magic, but that magic depends on Hogwarts itself. As long as the castle stands whole and unbroken, the seal holds. But the war, she trailed off. The war cracked the castle, Neville finished quietly. Walls fell, magic burned. The bond is breaking. A sudden creak echoed from the darkness behind them. They turned sharply. Sir Alaric Storm stepped into the light, his cloak damp from the rain. His eyes, gray as the sea in winter, studied the hat. Then you must act before it speaks again. Once the bound one's name is spoken thrice, his essence will awaken fully. Tell me, has it spoken twice already? Neville's breath caught. The hat had said, "The bound one stirs." Hermione's voice was barely a whisper. Twice? Then you have little time. The storm outside crashed against the windows, rattling them in their frames. Hermione gathered her parchments. If he's bound by the Founder's magic, then we need to restore that same enchantment. But we can't. 3 of them are gone, and Slytherin's legacy is complicated. Alaric looked at her gravely. Perhaps not as gone as you think. Neville turned toward him. What do you mean? Alaric hesitated, then unfastened a small silver locket from his neck. Inside was a shard of something black and glassy, etched with a serpent's mark. I am descended from those who once followed Salazar. My ancestors fled across the narrow sea after the schism, but they carried with them his writings, his runes of sealing and protection. Hermione's eyes widened. You mean you can reconstruct Slytherin's part of the spell? Perhaps, Alaric said, if we can find traces of the others. Gryffindor's essence lies in the hat, Ravenclaw's perhaps in the diadem that was lost, and Hufflepuff's in her cup. If we bring them together, Neville's heart began to pound, then we could repair the seal. But even as he spoke, the air turned cold. The candle flames dipped low, guttering one by one until the library was cast in a wavering half-darkness. And from the shadows came a voice, dry, rustling, and full of ancient mockery. You meddle with things beyond your grasp, little lions. The hat stirred upon the table, its brim twisting as though in pain. Its voice was no longer the soft whisper Neville had heard before. It was deeper, rougher, 2 voices layered atop one another. I see you, blood of Gryffindor. I see you, daughter of knowledge, and you... The hat turned its unseen gaze upon Alaric. You carry the serpent's curse still. How fitting. Neville raised his wand. Ravencourt. The hat's grin widened. Ah, the name is spoken a second time. Shall we make it 3? Not tonight, Hermione snapped. She lifted her wand and sent a charm bursting forth, a sphere of pure white light that surrounded the hat. The voice howled, shaking the shelves, and for a moment the library filled with a wind that smelled of dust and decay. Then silence. The hat lay still. Neville felt sweat trickle down his temple. That was close. Hermione was pale. He's waking faster than I thought. We need those relics, and we need them now. Alaric replaced his locket. Then we must travel. The cup was last seen in Gringotts, the diadem in the ruins of the Room of Requirement. Both lie within reach, if danger does not find us first. Neville glanced once more at the hat. It seemed to be watching them, though its folds did not move. He could not shake the feeling that it was smiling. Outside, the storm broke at last. Rain cascaded in silver sheets down the castle walls, and lightning flashed over the turrets. Deep within the earth beneath Hogwarts, the old stones shuddered, and something ancient stirred in answer. And though none of them could hear it, a faint song drifted through the sleeping halls, a tune half mournful, half triumphant. The hat's song, sung by another voice beneath it, a voice that was no longer content to be forgotten. Dawn crept across the highlands like a pale ghost, spilling faint light through the rain-washed windows of Hogwarts. In the great hall, the candles floated lower than usual, their flames dimmed as though reluctant to disturb the uneasy quiet. Neville had barely slept. His mind replayed the hat's words over and over, the second time. 2 utterances already spoken, and a third that would unleash whatever horror the founders had buried. He met Hermione and Sir Alaric at the entrance to the dungeons, where a faint mist clung to the steps like breath. The air was cool and smelled faintly of stone and damp earth. "The cup first," Hermione said briskly, tightening the clasp of her cloak. "If we can restore Hufflepuff's magic, it might reinforce the seal before Ravencourt can fully awaken." Alaric's gray eyes flickered with unease. The vaults of Gringotts are no easy place to tread, even for those with permission. The goblins have long memories, and they do not forgive trespass. Neville drew his wand, its tip glimmering faintly in the shadows. "Then we'll go the long way around." They left the castle before dawn broke fully, passing the half-mended gates where the Battle of Hogwarts had once raged. The road wound down through the mist toward Hogsmeade, and for a brief moment, Neville felt the warmth of memory. Honeyduke's sweet scent, the laughter of students in the snow. But the village was quiet now. Shuttered windows. Few dared return so soon after the war. By midday, they reached the train line where the tracks gleamed wet in the light. A ministry carriage awaited them, sent at Hermione's request. As it rattled through the countryside toward London, she unrolled parchment after parchment across her lap. "I found a fragment of the founder's original seal," she murmured. "It uses 4 runic anchors, one for each founder. If we can attune the relics to a new matrix, we might reinforce the original spell without breaking it." Neville smiled faintly. "You make it sound easy." "Nothing involving ancient soul magic is easy." Alaric leaned forward. "Tell me, Professor Granger, how strong is the connection between the relics and the castle? Could one draw upon Hogwarts' essence from afar?" Hermione considered. "Theoretically, yes, but the castle's magic is bound to its location. It would require an immense surge of power to bridge that distance. Alaric's expression darkened. Then the hat may already be trying. They fell into silence. Outside, the fields blurred into gray, and thunder grumbled far to the east. When at last they reached Diagon Alley, the streets were quieter than they remembered. The war had left scars here too, cracked stones, boarded up shops, the faint scent of ash that never quite left. But Gringotts still stood, its white marble gleaming defiantly under the gray sky. 2 goblins in burnished armor waited by the gate. Their sharp eyes narrowed as the trio approached. "State your business," one snapped. Hermione stepped forward. "We seek access to the vault, once belonging to Helga Hufflepuff. It was seized by the Ministry after the war as cursed property, but I have authorization." She handed over a scroll sealed with the crest of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The goblin studied it, grunted, and gestured for them to follow. The lift descended deep beneath the earth, the air growing colder with every passing level. Torches flared along the stone walls, casting shadows that danced like restless ghosts. At last they stopped before a massive iron door, its surface etched with vines of gold. The goblin inserted a long key, and the door swung open with a sigh that echoed through the tunnels. The vault glittered with treasures, cups, goblets, jewels, and trinkets collected across centuries, but in the center, upon a pedestal of carved oak, rested a single golden cup engraved with a badger and 4 ancient runes. Neville felt the air hum around it. "Hufflepuff's cup," Hermione whispered. As she reached out, the torches dimmed. The air thickened. From the shadows between the piles of treasure came a whisper, soft, mocking, terribly familiar. "Another relic? Another chain? You think to bind me again, little scholars?" The voice echoed through the vault. Hermione froze. He shouldn't be able to reach this far. Alaric drew his wand. He is reaching through the relics themselves. The goblin guard shouted something, but his words drowned beneath a sudden rush of wind. Coins lifted from the floor and spun through the air like a golden storm. The cup began to glow, faintly at first, then blindingly bright. Neville threw himself forward. "Hermione, the cup!" She grabbed it just as a crack of dark energy split the air, striking the pedestal where it had stood. The stone shattered. They ran. The vault doors slammed shut behind them, sealing the storm inside. When at last they stumbled into the upper hall, breathless and trembling, the goblins were shouting in panic. The magic in the vaults had awakened something old and hungry. Neville pressed his back against the wall, heart pounding. "He's trying to break the relics." Hermione nodded grimly. "If the relics are destroyed, the seal collapses. He'll be free." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Then we must move faster. The diadem next." They returned to Hogwarts before nightfall, the cup carefully sealed within protective charms. The castle loomed dark against the storm-lit sky, its windows glowing faintly like watchful eyes. Inside, the air felt colder than before. Even the portraits were silent, their painted faces drawn and uneasy. The great hall was empty save for the hat, still resting on its stool. It spoke before they reached it. "Ah, the cup returns. The faithful bring their chains again." Neville lifted his wand, but Hermione stayed his hand. "Not yet." She set the cup upon the table, its golden surface gleaming in the torchlight. "You can hear me, Ravencourt. Why destroy what you once helped create?" The hat's brim twitched. "Create? You mean imprison. They feared me because I sought unity. I would have ended their divisions. One school, one mind, one soul. but they tore me apart and sealed what remained within this rag. His voice was both sorrow and fury. Now I will finish what they began. The houses will be one at last, in me. The candles shuddered. A wind rushed through the hall, scattering parchments and extinguishing flames. The hat's folds writhed like something alive. Neville stepped forward. You'll not take Hogwarts. A cold laugh rippled through the air. Hogwarts is already mine. The stone remembers, the wood remembers, even the song you sing in your great hall was once mine. The hat's voice deepened, turning into a chant, ancient words that made the walls tremble. Above, the enchanted ceiling cracked open to reveal a swirl of storm clouds, lightning flashing in unnatural colors. Hermione raised her wand. Finite incantatum. Light blazed, and for a heartbeat the hat fell silent. Smoke curled from its brim. Alaric moved to her side. We must bind it again before he gathers strength. The cup is ready. One anchor. The diadem will be the second. But we will need the castle's heart to complete the spell. Neville frowned. The castle's heart? The place where its magic is born. Alaric said, the chamber of foundations, beneath the first stones laid by the founders. Few even know it exists. Hermione's voice was barely a whisper. Then that's where we'll end this? The hat let out a faint, rasping laugh. So be it, little lions. Seek your heart. When you find it, I will be waiting. Then it fell still. Neville felt the silence settle like dust after a storm. He glanced at Hermione and Alaric. Tomorrow we find the diadem. After that, the chamber. Outside, thunder rolled again over the hills, but somewhere beneath the castle's stones came another sound, faint, rhythmic, like the beating of a great heart awakening after 1,000 years of sleep. Morning dawned bleak and gray, the kind of light that barely seemed to touch the earth. The storm had passed, yet Hogwarts remained wrapped in silence, as though the castle itself held its breath. Every portrait Neville passed turned its painted head to watch him, whispering to one another in hushed tones. Even the ghosts drifted slower through the halls, uneasy shadows against the ancient walls. The trio met in the shattered courtyard that overlooked the lake. Mist hung low across the water, veiling the far bank where the forest rose dark and endless. Hermione spread a map across a stone bench, an old blueprint of the castle's earliest foundations, its edges brittle with age. The diadem was last seen in the room of requirement, she said, her finger tracing the path along the 7th floor corridor. After the battle, the room collapsed. Most thought it was destroyed, but I believe there's still a fragment left, a memory echo of the room's old magic. If we can reach it, we may be able to recover the diadem. Neville nodded grimly. And if the hat's influence has reached it already? Alaric rested a hand on his sword's hilt, a curious weapon for a wizard, forged from silver steel, etched with runes that glimmered faintly in the mist. Then we fight. They entered the castle through the broken doors of the great hall. The hat still sat on its stool, motionless now, though Neville could not shake the feeling that it watched them as they passed. The corridors beyond were dim and cold, lit only by the faint glow of torches. As they climbed higher, the castle seemed to twist around them, staircases that refused to settle, portraits that whispered in strange foreign tongues. When they reached the 7th floor, the corridor was quiet. The stretch of wall where the room of requirement once appeared stood scorched and cracked, but faint traces of magic shimmered in the air like heat. Hermione drew her wand. "Think of what we need," she murmured. We need the diadem. We need the room that remembers it. Neville closed his eyes. He focused on the lost crown, the one that had once adorned Rowena Ravenclaw's head, that had lain hidden for centuries before being twisted by dark magic. We need the room that holds what remains, he thought. The stones trembled. Slowly, impossibly, the outline of a door began to form upon the wall, glowing faintly with blue light. Alaric exhaled. It answers. The door swung inward, revealing a vast chamber filled with dust and silence. The ruins of the Room of Requirement stretched before them, a labyrinth of collapsed walls and broken relics, as though the room's many incarnations had all crumbled together. Faint wisps of magic drifted like fog between the ruins. They moved carefully through the debris. Piles of shattered furniture lay half buried in ash. Statues of forgotten students stood toppled, their faces cracked. Hermione pointed toward a far corner where faint silver light flickered. There! Half buried beneath a fallen beam, a circlet of ancient bronze glowed faintly, its gemstones pulsing like stars. Neville rushed forward, clearing the debris with a spell. "The diadem of Ravenclaw," he whispered. "It's still whole." Hermione reached out cautiously, her fingers brushing the metal. At once, a voice echoed softly in her mind. A woman's voice, calm and wise, filled with sorrow. "You seek to mend what should remain broken." Hermione gasped, drawing back. "It's her. Rowena Ravenclaw's essence still lingers." Neville stepped closer. "We're not here to break anything. We're trying to save Hogwarts." The diadem's light brightened, and the voice spoke again, though this time aloud, filling the chamber. "Hogwarts endures through its divisions. Unity forced by magic is no unity at all. Ravencourt sought to bind thought and soul. You cannot contain him without cost." "We'll pay it if we must," Hermione said quietly. A long pause, then the diadem's light dimmed, and the voice softened. "Then you must carry me to the castle's heart. I will lend my power once more, for the sake of the school." Neville lifted the circlet reverently, wrapping it in his cloak. The air in the room seemed to lighten for a heartbeat, but then a low rumble shook the stones. The torches guttered, dust fell from the ceiling, and through the shadows came the voice again, this time not gentle but mocking, a hiss that echoed from every corner. "Ah, the clever ones. Fetching my crown. Did you think I would let you keep it?" A gust of wind tore through the chamber. The debris rose like a storm of knives. Shadows spilled from the walls, taking form. Figures of darkness shaped like men, their faces blank and shifting. Neville raised his wand. "Get behind me," he shouted. "Protego Maxima." The shield flared to life, deflecting the first wave of shadow creatures, but the force rattled his bones. Alaric drew his silver sword, its runes blazing as he cut through the nearest wraith. Each stroke sent bursts of pale light scattering through the dark. "They are bound echoes," he shouted. "Fragments of Ravencourt's will." Hermione thrust her wand forward. "Lumos solum." A burst of pure sunlight filled the room. The shadows screamed and withered like smoke in wind. When the light faded, the chamber was silent once more, though the stones still trembled faintly beneath their feet. Neville's heart pounded. "He's watching us, everywhere." Hermione's face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "Then let him watch. We've got what we came for." They hurried back through the corridors, the diadem and cup, both sealed within enchanted satchels. As they passed the great hall again, the hat remained motionless, but faint whispers curled from it like smoke. Alaric paused. "He knows what we plan. Hermione didn't slow. Let him. We'll finish the spell before he can stop us. That night, they gathered in the old headmaster's office. The portraits of former headmasters lined the walls, silent witnesses to their work. Dumbledore's frame was empty, as it often was, but the other portraits whispered amongst themselves, uneasy and fearful. Hermione spread the relics upon the desk, the cup, the diadem, and an ancient rune-carved parchment that Alaric had produced from his satchel. "This is Slytherin's contribution," he explained. "The runes of binding. When joined with Gryffindor's magic from the hat, they complete the circle." Neville frowned. "And how do we use the hat without freeing him?" Alaric's gaze was steady. "We take it to the Chamber of Foundations. There, the castle itself will decide whether he is bound or destroyed." Outside, the wind began to rise again, howling around the towers. Hermione looked up at the portraits. "Headmasters of Hogwarts," she said firmly, "we seek to protect the school. Whatever happens, stand with us." A murmur rippled through the frames, some fearful, some resolute. The portrait of Phineas Nigellus gave a grudging nod. "If it saves the school, then so be it. But mark me, girl, such magic always demands its price." Neville lifted the hat gently from the stool. Its fabric was cold as stone. "Then we'd best be ready to pay it." As they left the office, the castle seemed to groan around them, as though sensing the storm to come. Somewhere deep below, in chambers long sealed and forgotten, water dripped steadily against ancient stone. The sound echoed like a heartbeat, and far away, in the silence of the great hall, the hat's eyes glimmered faintly beneath the brim, eyes that were not entirely its own. Ravencourt was waiting. The storm returned before dawn. Its thunder rolled through the high towers like the growl of an old dragon, shaking dust from the rafters and rattling the glass in the windows. Neville awoke before sunrise, heart pounding, the echo of a voice still whispering through his dream. The heart beneath the stone, follow the roots. He rose quietly and lit his wand. The dormitory of the professor's wing was dark, every corridor heavy with that strange stillness that had settled over Hogwarts in recent days. Even the portraits seemed to sleep uneasily, muttering in their frames as he passed. Hermione was already waiting in the great hall, her cloak drawn tight, maps and scrolls spread across the Gryffindor table. Beside her, Sir Alaric sharpened his silver rune blade with deliberate strokes, each rasping note echoing in the emptiness. The cup and the diadem lay sealed in enchanted satchels before them, faintly glowing through the fabric. Neville set down the old sorting hat upon the table. Its brim sagged like tired cloth, yet beneath the fold there shimmered an almost imperceptible pulse, as though something inside it still breathed. Hermione looked up. "I've found it," she said softly. "The Chamber of Foundations. It lies deeper than the Chamber of Secrets, older than any part of the castle now in use. It was built by the founders before the school even had walls, an underground hall carved from the bedrock itself. From there, they drew the first enchantments that bound the castle together." Neville frowned. "And how do we get to it?" "By following the roots of the Whomping Willow," she said. "It was planted as a guardian above the old tunnels. Beneath its roots lies the passage that leads to the chamber." Alaric sheathed his sword. "Then we go now. Every moment we wait, the hat's power grows stronger." They set out across the grounds as dawn struggled through thick clouds. The storm had not yet broken, but lightning flickered at the horizon, turning the forest to black silhouettes. The grass glistened with dew, and the castle behind them loomed vast and silent, as though watching their departure. The whomping willow stood motionless in the windless air, its branches still, its bark wet and dark as iron. Hermione approached cautiously, murmuring a charm under her breath. The roots shivered. A deep groan rolled through the earth, and slowly the great tree bent its branches aside, revealing a hollow at its base. A tunnel sloped downward into darkness. Neville took the lead, wand raised, the faint light gleaming off the damp stone. The passage twisted beneath the earth, winding deeper and deeper until the last trace of daylight vanished. The air grew cold and smelled faintly of ancient water. After what felt like an hour, they emerged into a vast cavern. The walls were carved with runes older than any language Neville knew, glowing faintly blue. In the center stood a circular platform of black marble, inscribed with the symbols of the 4 houses, each joined by a single ring of gold. Hermione drew in a sharp breath. The Chamber of Foundations. Alaric stepped forward, his boots echoing on the stone. This is where Hogwarts began. They placed the relics at the 4 corners of the platform. The cup to the north, the diadem to the east, the hat to the west, and in the south, Alaric knelt to trace Slytherin's runes in silver dust. The air shimmered faintly as the relics attuned to the chamber's ancient magic. Hermione opened her book, the parchment quivering in her hands. The spell of rebinding requires all 4 essences united. Each relic must offer its power freely. If even one resists... She didn't finish. They all knew what that meant. Neville looked at the hat. Its brim twitched once, almost imperceptibly. "You think to chain me again," the voice hissed, faint but sharp. 4 houses, 4 minds, forever divided, forever weak. "Enough," Neville said. "You tried to rule them once, and they sealed you for it. This ends tonight." The hat's folds twisted. "Ends? No, child, it begins. You cannot build unity upon fear." "Perhaps not," Hermione said softly, stepping forward, "but we can build peace upon choice." She raised her wand. "In vinculo fundare." The runes along the floor blazed with light. The cup flared golden, the diadem silver, the hat crimson, and the serpent rune beneath Alaric's hand glowed emerald green. The colors spiraled together, weaving a brilliant sphere of white light that hovered above the center of the chamber. For a heartbeat, the magic held steady. Then the hat screamed. The sound tore through the chamber like a storm, shaking the very walls. The light flickered. The floor split with a crack of thunder, and black mist poured from the hat, coiling upward into the shape of a man, tall, hooded, his eyes burning with blue fire. Ravencourt. His voice was like the grinding of stone. "You cannot bind what is already part of you. I am the unity you fear. I am the dream the founders denied." Neville raised his wand, shouting a shield charm, but the dark wizard's spirit struck it aside with ease. The light dimmed, the relics trembled, and the seal's energy began to fracture. Hermione's spell faltered. "He's breaking through. Hold the circle," Alaric bellowed. He drove his sword into the floor, the silver blade sinking deep into the stone. Runes along its edge ignited, casting a barrier of green fire that forced Ravencourt back. But the spirit only laughed, its voice echoing through the hall. "Blood of Slytherin," it hissed, turning its gaze upon Alaric. "Do you even know what oath your line swore?" You are mine by birthright. Alaric's face tightened. No more. With a shout, he tore open the locket around his neck. The black shard within blazed, and he thrust it into the heart of the spell. The fragment of Slytherin's rune fused with the circle, and the barrier flared once more. Ravencourt staggered. The shadows around him frayed, torn by the renewed light. Neville saw his chance. He leapt forward, wand raised. Expulso! The blast struck Ravencourt squarely, driving him backward into the column of white fire that had risen from the floor. He screamed, a sound like 1,000 voices crying out, and the hat fell to the ground, smoldering. Hermione's voice rang through the chaos. Now bind him! All three spoke together, their wands raised, voices joining as one. Anima legata domus una. The light exploded outward, blinding white, filling every crevice of the chamber. The roar of the storm above echoed through the earth, and for a moment all of Hogwarts trembled. Then, silence. The light faded. The hat lay still. The air smelled of rain and ashes. Hermione collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. Neville knelt beside her. Did it work? She looked toward the platform. The runes still glowed faintly, steady and whole. The hat was scorched, but motionless. I think so, she whispered. He's bound again. Alaric stood apart, his sword dim, his expression unreadable. The seal holds, for now. But such power never dies completely. Neville picked up the hat. It was warm to the touch, and for a heartbeat he thought he heard a faint whisper. Thank you. He wasn't sure whose voice it was. As they made their way back up through the tunnels, dawn broke once more above the castle. The air was clean, and the first light spilled across the towers like gold. Hogwarts stood whole again, yet deep beneath its stones, in the Chamber of Foundations, the runes pulsed faintly with red light, slow and steady like the beat of a slumbering heart. The sun rose pale and weak over the towers of Hogwarts, its light thin as old parchment. The storm had finally broken, yet the air felt changed, as if the wind itself remembered what had happened beneath the earth. The castle stood quiet, serene even, but Neville knew better. Silence at Hogwarts was never peace. It was the breath before the next stirring. He walked alone along the battlements that morning, the sorting hat clasped beneath his arm. It had not spoken since the night of the sealing. Its brim hung limp, and though he fancied he felt a pulse within its threads, it no longer whispered in the back of his mind. For the first time in weeks, he almost believed it was only cloth and stitch again. Hermione joined him soon after, her expression weary but bright. The wards are holding, she said. Every censor I placed in the castle shows stable magic. The Founder's enchantments have rebalanced themselves. Neville nodded, though a knot of unease still sat in his chest. And Alaric? She hesitated. He's down in the dungeons. Said he needed to see something before he leaves. Neville frowned. Leaves? Hermione folded her arms. He says his task here is done, that his family's debt to Hogwarts is repaid. But I think there's more he's not telling us. The morning passed in slow quiet. Students would return soon. The new term was only weeks away. Repairs were nearly finished, and the ghosts had resumed their gliding gossip through the halls. It should have felt like peace. And yet every time Neville passed a shadowed archway or heard the wind hum through the corridors, he thought of that voice, the voice that had nearly broken free from the hat. At noon, Alaric appeared in the great hall. His traveling cloak was fastened high, his sword at his belt, his silver locket now empty. There was something solemn in his bearing, as though he had already taken leave in his heart. Hermione met him halfway down the aisle. "You're truly going?" He inclined his head. "My place is not here. The bound one's spirit was born of my bloodline." "If he ever stirs again, I must be ready to end it. Hogwarts will be safer if I watch from afar." Neville studied him closely. "You're afraid he's not gone?" Alaric's eyes flicked toward the hat, resting on the staff table. "Evil that is bound rarely dies. It sleeps, but it listens." He turned back to them, his voice low. "If the hat ever sings again of one mind ruling all houses, you will know he dreams still." Hermione pressed the diadem into his hands. "Take this, then. Ravenclaw's wisdom will serve you better than it will in our vaults." He looked surprised. "This belongs to the school. It belongs where it can guard what's left of him," she said firmly. Alaric bowed deeply. "Then I will bear it until Hogwarts calls for it again." He left before the sun reached its height, striding through the gates as the wind rose behind him. The last Neville saw of him was the gleam of silver runes on his blade, flashing once in the light before he vanished down the road toward the misty north. For a time the days passed in calm. Professors returned, laughter echoed once more in the corridors, and the house elves scrubbed away the last soot stains of war. The new sorting ceremony was set for September 1st, and it was Neville's task, as deputy head of Gryffindor House, to prepare the hall. When he placed the hat upon its stool that evening, he hesitated. "You've had enough excitement for a lifetime," he murmured. "Best you stay quiet tonight." The hat did not reply. It only drooped slightly as if nodding in agreement. That night, Hogwarts slept beneath clear stars, but in the small hours, a soft creak woke Neville. He sat up, blinking into the darkness. The moonlight pooled across his desk where the hat lay. For a moment, he thought he'd imagined the sound. Then it came again, a whisper, faint as breath. "Thank you, Neville Longbottom." He froze. "Who's there?" The voice was not Ravencourt's. It was warm, quiet, touched with the echo of a smile. Not him. Not anymore. "The Founder's magic endures. I am what remains of their will and his." Neville swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "The seal holds, but not all darkness is meant to be destroyed. A part of him lingers within me, bound but changed. His desire for unity became a wish for balance. Hogwarts remembers all who have walked its halls, even those who strayed." Neville set the hat gently back on the stool. "So it's over. For now." Then the voice faded. The hat fell still. When morning came, he told Hermione what he'd heard. She listened carefully, frowning in thought. "It sounds like the castle absorbed what was left of his essence. If so, the hat's no longer a prison. It's part of Hogwarts again, whole." "Do you trust it?" Neville asked. Hermione looked toward the stool. The hat sat silently, rays of sunlight catching the frayed edges of its brim. "Yes," she said at last. "I think I do." The weeks that followed passed without event. September arrived, bringing with it the rumble of the Hogwarts Express and the chatter of new students filling the halls with life. The great hall gleamed once more, banners bright, candles floating high under the restored, enchanted ceiling. Neville stood with the professors as the first years lined up before the stool. He caught sight of their nervous faces, wide eyes, trembling hands clutching their robes, and felt an old ache of memory. He smiled to himself. Minerva McGonagall returned at last to preside over the sorting, lifted the hat. The entire hall fell silent. For a long moment it did not move. Then softly it began to sing. Its voice was low, clear, and solemn, a song of renewal, not conquest. It sang of 4 houses, different yet equal, bound by courage, kindness, wisdom, and ambition. It sang of the war that had ended and the scars that must heal, though time may turn and tempests rage, and darkness rise anew. The heart of Hogwarts ever stands, for courage and for you. The hall erupted in applause. Some wept quietly, even among the older students. Hermione leaned toward Neville and whispered, "That song wasn't in any of its old records." "No," Neville murmured, watching the hat's brim tilt like a smile. "I think it learned something new." The ceremony passed without a single flicker of unease. Each child found their place. The torches burned bright, and the castle seemed to hum with contentment, as though breathing again after a long illness. Later, when the feast had ended and the stars gleamed over the lake, Neville lingered by the doors of the great hall. The hat sat quietly on its stool once more. He bowed to it as one might to an old friend. "Sleep well," he said softly. "You've earned it." No answer came, yet the faintest warmth lingered in the air, like a sigh of gratitude carried on the night breeze. High above the castle, the owls of the owlery took flight, wheeling across the starlit sky. Far below, beneath the stones and foundations where ancient runes still pulsed, a single thread of golden light flickered once, steady and strong, the heartbeat of a school that had weathered centuries of darkness and would surely weather centuries more. And though no one heard it, deep within the hat's weave, a whisper lingered, neither threat nor promise, but a truth as old as Hogwarts itself. All souls that walk these halls become part of its story. The castle slept, but it dreamed. Winter crept over the Scottish hills like a silver cloak, and Hogwarts gleamed beneath its weight. Snow hung thick upon the battlements, muffling every sound, and the lake below lay sealed beneath a sheet of ice that mirrored the moon. The students had gone home for the holidays, leaving the castle to its caretakers and the whisper of ghosts. Neville Longbottom remained behind that year. He told Hermione it was to tend the greenhouses during the frost, but in truth, he did not wish to leave the castle unguarded. Though months had passed since the binding of Ravencourt, the memory of that night still echoed in his mind like the toll of a distant bell. Each evening, he would walk the corridors with a lantern, its golden glow flickering against the ancient walls. Sometimes he thought he heard footsteps behind him, or the faint hum of the Sorting Hat's song echoing from the great hall. It was never more than a whisper, but it reminded him that Hogwarts was never truly still. One night, as the wind howled beyond the towers, Neville found himself drawn once again to the Hall of Foundations. The entrance beneath the Whomping Willow had been sealed by Hermione's wards, but he felt a tug in his heart as though the castle itself were calling him. He followed that pull down through the tunnels, wand light guiding his steps. The air grew colder with every descent. When at last he reached the great marble platform, the runes upon its surface glowed faintly, steady, calm, alive. Neville placed a hand upon the stone. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured. "That's good. Stay that way." But as he turned to leave, he noticed something strange. At the edge of the chamber, where the shadows gathered thickest, a single tendril of light shimmered faintly. It looked like golden thread, weaving through the air as though alive. He stepped closer. The thread pulsed once, and a voice, soft as a dream, filled the hall. "Fear not, child of Gryffindor. The storm is past." Neville froze. The voice was familiar, not Ravencourt's, not the hat's, but older, gentle. "Who are you?" he whispered, a memory of what was before. "The Founder's will still breathes here, bound in the stone. You have kept faith, and the school endures." He bowed his head. "We only did what we had to." "That is all any of us ever did," the voice said. Then the light faded, and the chamber was silent once more. Neville lingered a moment longer before leaving, the echo of those words warming him against the chill. In the weeks that followed, Hogwarts entered its quietest season. Snow piled against the castle's windows, and the fireplaces burned high through the long nights. Hermione visited often, her arms full of books, eager as ever to document what they had learned. "It's remarkable," she told Neville one evening in the library. "The Founder's enchantments are adjusting themselves. The magic feels different, lighter somehow, as if the castle is healing." Neville smiled faintly. "You sound surprised." "I suppose I am. For centuries, Hogwarts reacted only to threats. But now it seems to be, well, alive." As if in answer, the torches flickered brighter, and a low creak echoed through the beams above like laughter too old to name. Hermione laughed softly. "See? I think it approves." Outside, the snowstorm thickened, swirling like white smoke around the towers. Thunder rumbled far away, unusual for winter, but neither of them paid it mind. That night, Neville dreamed. He stood again in the Chamber of Foundations, but the runes were dark. From the center rose a figure cloaked in shadow. It was not Ravencourt this time, but a tall woman with eyes like starlight and hair of flowing silver. She regarded him with quiet sorrow. "The seal holds," she said, "but its strength depends not on stone or spell, but on memory. Should Hogwarts ever forget what was done here, the binding will weaken." Neville stepped closer. "Who are you?" "Rowena," she said simply. "I linger as thought, as wisdom yet unspoken. Remember, child of courage, knowledge unremembered becomes peril reborn." When he woke, his breath hung in the air. The fire in his grate had died, and frost rimed the window. Yet upon his bedside table lay a single raven feather, black as midnight, glimmering faintly blue in the dawn. He showed it to Hermione the next morning. She examined it closely, brow furrowed. "No bird could have left this. It's imbued with intent magic, like a message." "From Ravenclaw herself," Neville said quietly. Hermione's gaze turned distant. "Then perhaps she's warning us. If the seal depends on memory, we should record everything, every spell, every rune, every word we used that night. We can't let this knowledge vanish again." And so they did. Together they began to compile the chronicles of the Founder's binding, a secret tome that would rest in the restricted section of the library, accessible only to future headmasters and those who swore the oath of Hogwarts. Days slipped into weeks, and the snow gave way to rain. By spring, the castle stirred anew. Students returned, laughter filled the halls, and even Peeves seemed brighter in mischief. But one gray afternoon, as Neville tended the greenhouses, he noticed something strange. The roots of a mandrake pot quivered, though there was no wind. He crouched down, frowning, and then he heard it, a faint, rhythmic hum rising from the earth below. He touched the soil. The vibration pulsed steady and strong, like the heartbeat of something vast. That night, he and Hermione returned to the chamber once more. The runes still glowed, but one of them, the sigil of the serpent, flickered weakly. "Alaric's rune," Hermione murmured. The Slytherin line was part of the seal. If his blood weakens, the bond could falter. Neville's stomach tightened. He's far from here. If something's happened to him, then we'll feel it in the castle first, she said. The Founder's magic ties all their descendants together through Hogwarts itself. They worked quickly, strengthening the runes with new enchantments, anchoring them to the cup and diadem once more. As the light stabilized, Hermione exhaled in relief. It's holding, but it's not as strong as before. Neville looked toward the ceiling, where the weight of the castle pressed down. Then we'll have to find him. Hermione nodded grimly, and soon, above them the torches guttered, though no wind touched the air. The glow along the walls dimmed for just an instant, and in that fleeting darkness, a whisper coiled through the chamber. Unity requires all four. They both heard it, though neither spoke of it. When they emerged into the night, rain swept the grounds, and lightning flashed faintly over the mountains. The castle loomed behind them, vast and watchful, its spires shrouded in cloud. Hogwarts slept once more. But deep beneath its roots, the serpent's rune flickered like a dying star, and far away beyond the sea and storm, a figure bearing a silver sword turned his head toward the west, as though he had heard his name carried upon the wind. Far to the east, beyond the cold waters of the narrow sea, the wind screamed over mountains sharp as dragon's teeth. The land there was older, harder, a country of gray cliffs and black pines where magic had withered but not died. It was there that Sir Alaric Storm rode alone beneath a sky heavy with stormlight, the diadem of Ravenclaw bound in a satchel at his side. He had left Hogwarts behind to keep its relics safe, but the whispers had followed him. They came in his sleep, soft at first, then louder with each passing night. Whispers in the voice of his forefathers calling him to the fortress of his bloodline, the citadel of Sablemere. Once it had been a stronghold of scholars who studied the dark arts forbidden by the Founders. Now it was a ruin half buried in snow. Yet as Alaric climbed the mountain path, the torches upon its towers flared to life as though they had been waiting. He entered the great hall through gates that hung crooked on their hinges. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of old incense. Shadows clung to the stone walls where ancestral portraits hung, their painted eyes glimmering faintly in the dim light. Home again, he muttered, though it never was. As he laid the diadem upon the cracked marble table, a low wind moved through the hall, scattering the dust. And then a voice spoke, ancient, cold, and familiar. So the serpent returns to its nest. Alaric drew his sword in an instant. Show yourself. From the far end of the chamber, the air shimmered. A figure emerged, tall, cloaked, his form woven from shadow and starlight. His face was Alaric's own, though his eyes burned like coals. Blood calls to blood, the phantom said. Did you think you could run from what you are? Alaric's grip tightened. I am no vessel of Ravencourt. His soul was bound again. The figure smiled. Bound? Foolish boy. You think a soul can be split once and stay whole? The Founders sealed his essence within the hat, yes, but his lineage, his echo, that lies in you. You are the last of his flesh, the final fragment of his will. Alaric's heart pounded. You're nothing but a memory. Then why do you listen? The air thickened, the torches flaring blue. The shadow stepped closer, its voice a whisper of silk and venom. You could restore the old unity he dreamed of. You have the diadem. Ravenclaw's wisdom, and the blood of Slytherin's line. Bring them together, and the magic of Hogwarts will answer you. Become what the founders feared. Alaric raised his wand. Be silent. Light flared from the runes on his sword, and the shadow shrieked, retreating into the corners of the hall. But even as it vanished, its laughter lingered. You cannot silence what sleeps within your blood, Alaric Storm. When the serpent wakes, so will you. Silence fell. Only the wind moaned through the cracks of the old stone. He sheathed his sword, chest heaving. The diadem shimmered faintly on the table, its gems glowing as though aware. He touched it, and the voice of Rowena Ravenclaw filled his mind. Calm, cool, like moonlight upon snow. Do not heed the whispers. The past seeks only to bind you. You are not him. Alaric closed his eyes, gripping the diadem tightly. Then help me end this. Tell me how to keep his power from awakening again. But the diadem gave no answer, only a soft pulse of light before fading into stillness. For 3 days he remained in the ruins of Sablemere, searching its halls for traces of his ancestors' writings. He found fragments, scrolls written in the old tongue, diagrams of runes that pulsed faintly with dormant magic. One phrase appeared again and again: unity through the circle. It was the same motto Ravencourt had spoken in the Hat's voice, the same creed that had led him to betrayal. On the 3rd night, as he stood beneath the broken roof and watched the snow fall, Alaric made his decision. He would not flee his blood any longer. He would face it. He built a fire in the center of the hall and placed the diadem before it. You were forged by wisdom, he said quietly. Then let that wisdom judge me. The flame rose high, casting long shadows. The diadem began to hum, a sound low and clear, filling the air with music that was not of this world. The runes on the walls answered, glowing with lines of green and silver light that spiraled toward the ceiling. For a heartbeat, Alaric felt the presence of countless voices, the founders, the ghosts of scholars, even Ravencourt himself. Distant but watching, the castle of Hogwarts seemed to stir in his memory, its stones trembling as though feeling his choice across the miles. Then the vision shattered. The flames turned white. Power surged through him, fierce and terrible. He saw flashes. Neville and Hermione standing in the Chamber of Foundations, the runes flickering, the hat trembling upon its stool. He saw the serpent sigil flaring, cracks spreading like veins of lightning across its stone surface. Ravencourt's laughter filled his mind. Unity requires all 4. You cannot hold the seal without the serpent. Alaric fell to his knees, gasping. No, I won't let you. But the voice only grew stronger. Then return to them. Bring the last of the Founder's blood to their circle. Only together can the seal be made whole, and only through you can I live again. With a cry, Alaric struck the diadem with his sword. Sparks flew, the metal singing like a living thing. But it did not break. The gem at its center glowed brighter, and the voice of Ravenclaw spoke once more. The choice is yours, child of serpents. Your blood can destroy or preserve. But choose soon, for the seal weakens even now. When the light faded, Alaric stood alone. The diadem lay silent, yet its glow no longer frightened him. He knew what he had to do. At dawn, he rode from the citadel, leaving its torches burning behind him. The snowstorm had passed, and the path westward stretched beneath a sky washed clean of clouds. His horse's hooves struck sparks from the frozen stone as he descended toward the sea. Behind him, the ruins of Sablemere crumbled further, stones falling into dust, as if the mountain itself sought to bury its secrets. Across the waters, far away in the sleeping halls of Hogwarts, Hermione woke with a start. The serpent rune beneath the castle blazed suddenly bright, casting green light upon the chamber of foundations. Neville burst into the room moments later, wand in hand. "What is it?" Hermione pointed at the glowing rune, eyes wide. "He's coming back, the seal. He's calling to it." Neville looked down, heart thundering. The magic pulsed in rhythm, steady, deliberate. Then, he's chosen his side. Above them the castle groaned, ancient timbers creaking like the bones of giants. Dust fell from the vaulted ceiling, and the torches along the walls flared blue. For the first time since the binding, Hogwarts trembled not in fear but in anticipation, waiting for the last heir of the serpent to return. The sea was black beneath the winter moon, restless and cold as iron. Alaric Storm stood at the bow of the small wizarding ship as it cut through the waves toward the western horizon. The diadem lay wrapped in cloth beside him, its faint silver glow seeping through the folds. Each pulse of light echoed like a heartbeat against the dark. He had not slept since leaving Sablemere. When his eyes closed, he saw flashes of fire and shadow, the serpent rune burning beneath Hogwarts, the hat trembling upon its stool, the faces of those who waited. He did not know whether he was returning to save the castle or to doom it, but he knew one thing: the seal could not hold without him. The journey took 3 days, and when the Scottish coast rose from the mist, Alaric felt a strange calm settle over him. The cliffs loomed tall and gray, crowned with frost, and above them the turrets of Hogwarts pierced the clouds like watchtowers of a sleeping giant. The sight stirred something deep in his chest, a pull older than memory. By the time he reached the gates, night had fallen. The grounds were quiet, the air heavy with mist. From the windows of the great hall, candlelight glowed warm and steady. He dismounted, every muscle aching, and crossed the courtyard where snow crunched beneath his boots. Hermione met him at the doors, her wand already drawn. "You came back," she said, though her tone carried both relief and wariness. "I was called," Alaric replied simply. "The seal weakens." Neville appeared behind her, his wand lit. "You're sure this isn't another trick?" Alaric held out the diadem. "You'll know soon enough. The relic answered to me when the shadow tried to rise. Whatever lies in my blood, I choose to use it for the castle's sake." Hermione studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then come. The chamber is stirring again." They descended once more through the tunnels beneath the Whomping Willow. The earth trembled faintly with every step, and the air shimmered with residual magic. When they entered the Chamber of Foundations, the sight froze them where they stood. The runes across the marble floor pulsed wildly, red, blue, gold, and green, weaving together like veins of fire. At the center, the hat hovered in midair, its fabric rippling as though caught in an unseen wind. Neville lifted his wand, but the hat spoke first. Its voice was deep, layered, almost human. "He returns. The serpent completes the circle." Hermione's hand trembled. "What does it want?" "Balance," said the hat. "The founders will calls to their heirs. 4 magics must unite, or the castle will fall to silence. Ravencourt's power sleeps no longer in darkness. It has become part of Hogwarts itself." Neville's pulse quickened. Then the seal didn't destroy him. It transformed him. "Yes," the hat whispered. "The school is alive because of him. but the balance falters. His magic seeks its source, the blood of the last Slytherin. All eyes turned to Alaric. He took a steady breath and stepped forward. "Then take it." Hermione's eyes widened. "No." But he raised his sword. Before she could stop him, the runes along its edge burned green, the same hue as the serpent's sigil. "You said it yourself, Professor Granger. Unity requires all four. The others gave their essence to this place long ago. Now it's my turn." Neville moved toward him. "You don't have to." "I do," Alaric said, voice calm. "My line began this curse. It ends with me." He knelt in the center of the circle and placed the diadem before the hat. The two relics glowed together, one silver, one crimson, their light weaving into a blinding white. Hermione whispered a spell of containment, but the magic swelled beyond control. A gust of wind tore through the chamber. The runes on the floor blazed with unbearable brilliance, and Alaric's eyes went wide. "It's not the seal that needs blood," he gasped. "It's the castle itself." Before Neville could reach him, the light engulfed them all. For an endless instant, Alaric saw the world between worlds, the four founders standing in a circle of flame. Gryffindor's eyes shone with fire, Ravenclaw's with starlight, Hufflepuff's with gold, and Slytherin's with the deep green of old forests. Between them burned a fifth light, the spirit of Ravencourt, vast and formless, bound in threads of magic that wove through the stones of Hogwarts. Slytherin turned toward Alaric, his expression neither cruel nor kind. "Blood of my blood," he said softly. "We forged this place not for division but for truth. The serpent's gift is not ambition, it is survival, and survival demands sacrifice." Alaric's breath came shallow. "Tell me what to do." "Give what was taken," said Slytherin. "Not blood, will." The vision faded. He was back in the chamber, his sword trembling in his hands. The runes beneath him flared green, and the hat's voice rose above the storm of magic. "Choose, Alaric Storm. Bind your will to Hogwarts, or let it fade and fall." He looked once to Hermione, who stood shielding Neville from the gale. Her eyes met his, steady, knowing. Then Alaric plunged his sword into the marble floor. The chamber exploded in light. The power surged through him like fire and water intertwined, burning away every trace of darkness left in his veins. He felt himself dissolve, not dying, but becoming something vast. The runes blazed brighter, their chaos giving way to harmony. The serpent's sigil steadied, its glow merging with the others until all four houses shone as one. The storm ceased. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. When the light dimmed, Alaric was gone. His sword remained, embedded in the marble, its runes pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The hat rested at its base, silent once more. Neville lowered his wand, eyes wide. He's part of it now, isn't he? Hermione knelt beside the sword, touching its hilt gently. "Yes, his will join the founders. The circle is complete." The air in the chamber shimmered, and for an instant a voice filled the room. Not Ravencourt's this time, nor Alaric's, but something larger, warmer, and whole. "The school endures. Four become one. The serpent sleeps, not in chains, but in peace." The runes faded to a soft glow like stars beneath the earth. They left the chamber together, their steps slow and heavy. When they emerged beneath the open sky, dawn was breaking. The light spilled across the castle, gilding its towers and windows in gold. The very stones seemed to hum with quiet strength. Hermione turned to Neville. "Do you think he knew what it would cost?" Neville's gaze lingered on the rising sun. He knew, and he chose it anyway. The wind rose, soft and cold, carrying faint whispers through the air, echoes of ancient voices, proud and gentle. Somewhere deep within the castle, the sorting hat stirred, and though no one was there to hear it, it whispered a new line into the song it would sing next year. 4 hearts, 1 soul beneath the stone, their strength the school's eternal throne. And high above, where dawn touched the tallest spire, the ravens of Hogwarts took flight, black wings gleaming in the light of a world made whole again. Spring returned to Hogwarts with the scent of rain and green things newly awakened. The snow had melted from the hills, leaving the valley bright with mist and tender grass. The castle gleamed as though reborn, its walls scrubbed clean by wind and time. Yet within its stones, something had changed. The air was charged with quiet life, as though the school itself breathed again. Doors opened more easily, staircases seemed less mischievous. Even the portraits appeared content, their colors richer, their voices softer. Professor Neville Longbottom felt it most keenly. In the greenhouses, the plants had never flourished like this, not even in the years before the war. The flowers grew tall and vivid, the magical herbs glowed faintly at dusk, and the rarest of his seedlings bloomed without coaxing. He could almost feel the castle's magic in the roots, pulsing like a steady heart beneath the soil. But peace at Hogwarts had always been fragile. It was a week after the spring term began when he noticed the dreams again. They started faintly, like whispers carried on wind, voices too distant to understand. Then came the visions. Flashes of stone halls filled with golden light, the faint hum of runes awakening, and a figure standing before the ancient sword, still embedded in the chamber floor. At first, Neville thought they were memories of that terrible night, yet each time he awoke, he felt the same unshakable sense that the dream was not his own. Hermione confirmed it when she visited his office 2 days later. "You've been hearing them too," she said, eyes shadowed with fatigue. He nodded. "The voice calls to me in my sleep. I thought it was Alaric." "It is," she said softly. "Or rather, what remains of him. I've been studying the changes in the castle's magic. It's adapting again, not collapsing this time, growing. The 4 founders' enchantments have found balance, but Alaric's will, it's spreading through the stone, linking itself with the heart of Hogwarts." Neville frowned. "You mean he's part of the castle now?" "More than that," Hermione's voice lowered. "He is the castle's guardian spirit. His sacrifice gave Hogwarts new life, but it's drawing power faster than before, as if preparing for something." The words chilled Neville. "Another threat?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but we should be ready." For days the castle hummed quietly, the tremor barely noticeable. The students paid it no mind. Exams loomed, Quidditch roared across the skies, and spring festivals filled the evenings with song. Only those who had fought before, Neville, Hermione, even old Professor McGonagall, felt the tension in the air, like the deep breath before a storm. Then came the night of the full moon. Neville woke to the sound of thunder that was not thunder. It rolled beneath the castle, shaking the dormitory floors. The portraits shouted in alarm, and the ghosts flickered in panic, their forms distorted by the surge of magic. He ran through the corridors, his wand alight, robes flying behind him. At the top of the grand staircase, he met Hermione, her face pale in the wand light. "It's the chamber," she shouted over the din. "Something's breaking free." Together they raced through the tunnels. The air grew thick with raw energy, crackling like lightning trapped underground. When they reached the Chamber of Foundations, they stopped short. The marble floor blazed with light. The sword of Alaric Storm glowed brighter than any flame, its runes alive with motion. The 4 symbols of the houses pulsed in time with it, their colors mingling until the entire room shimmered gold. At the center of it all hovered the Sorting Hat. Neville's breath caught. No. The hat's brim twisted, its voice rising in a chant that filled the hall. 4 hearts as one, bound in stone and soul. The guardian wakes. The circle is whole. The light erupted upward, forming the figure of a man, translucent, tall, his features carved in radiance. It was Alaric, or rather the essence of him, the ghost of a man who was not a ghost. His eyes burned with calm fire, his form woven from the same golden threads that linked every rune in the floor. Hermione stepped forward, her wand trembling in her hand. Alaric? The figure inclined his head. His voice was deeper now, layered with the echo of many others. The founders, perhaps, or the castle itself. Do not fear, the seal endures, but the magic of Hogwarts has awoken fully, and with it its memory. Neville's voice was barely a whisper. Memory of what? Of the first unity, Alaric said. Of the bond the founders forged when they built this school. The same power that bound me now spreads through every stone and stair. Hogwarts will never again be divided, not by darkness nor by time. Hermione's eyes glistened. Then it's alive. It always was, Alaric said gently, but now it remembers. The chamber quieted. The light dimmed until the runes glowed softly, peaceful at last. Alaric's figure began to fade, his smile faint and weary. Guard it well, he said, his gaze upon them both. You are the stewards of its heart. Then he was gone, his light sinking into the sword, which flared once before stilling. Neville exhaled shakily. I thought we'd lost him forever. Hermione smiled faintly. We didn't lose him. He became what Hogwarts needed. They stood in silence for a while, the soft hum of the runes filling the air. It was not the tense vibration of danger this time, but a steady, rhythmic pulse. The sound of magic breathing, calm and alive. When they returned to the surface, dawn had broken over the hills. The lake shimmered with light, and the first rays of sun caught the towers, gilding their stone with gold. The students would wake soon, unaware that the castle beneath them had changed forever. That evening, after classes ended, Neville wandered to the great hall. The Sorting Hat rested upon its stool, as always quiet and unassuming. He sat beside it for a long time, lost in thought. After a while, the hat spoke. You look troubled, Professor. Neville smiled faintly. Just thinking about everything we've seen, everything we've done. Hogwarts remembers, you know, the hat said softly. Every choice, every courage, every kindness. The founders built it to last, but it's those who love it who make it live. He nodded slowly. I think I understand that now. Good, said the hat. Because the story isn't done. It never is. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the hall. The candles flickered, their flames steady and warm, and deep beneath the castle, the chamber of foundations glowed faintly in the dark, the sword of Alaric Storm gleaming at its center like a promise. The runes pulsed in slow rhythm, echoing the heartbeat of the school and the spirit of the wizard who had given everything to preserve it. Hogwarts slept, dreaming not of war, but of peace. A peace born from unity, sacrifice, and the courage of those who would forever guard its soul. Summer came to Hogwarts like a blessing. The air was soft and sweet, filled with the scent of blooming roses and the low hum of bees among the flowers. The castle basked in sunlight, its ancient towers gleaming against skies of blue and silver. From the great lake came the gentle whisper of waves, and the forbidden forest shimmered green and endless beyond the hills. To most, the world seemed healed. Students studied, laughed, and played. Owls glided lazily across the evening sky. The scars of war were fading, and the new generation of witches and wizards walked the halls, unaware of the price that had been paid for their peace. Yet for Neville Longbottom, peace had always come hand in hand with vigilance. He stood upon the astronomy tower one quiet dusk, gazing out over the grounds. The wind tugged at his cloak, carrying with it the scent of grass and wood smoke. Far below, the lake caught the light of the setting sun and turned it to fire. Hermione joined him not long after, a stack of books in her arms and her expression thoughtful. "You never rest," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Neither do you." She set the books upon the ledge beside him. "These are the newest readings from the castle's magical core. The flow of energy through the runes is steady, stronger than ever actually, but there's something strange." "Strange how?" "It's changing," she said, glancing toward the distant towers. "Almost growing, like the castle's learning. Every few weeks it adjusts the enchantments on its own. Locks open at different hours, corridors shift in new patterns. Even the portraits have started painting new scenes." Neville chuckled softly. "I suppose Hogwarts is finally tired of routine." Hermione didn't smile. "It's more than that. It's evolving." Her words lingered in the evening air. Neville thought of Alaric Storm, the man whose will had become one with the castle's heart, and of the founders whose spirit still lingered in its stones. "Maybe that's what they wanted," he said quietly. "A school that could grow, the way people do." Hermione nodded slowly, though her brow remained furrowed. "Perhaps, but I can't help wondering what it's growing into." As the days passed, small wonders began to appear. The castle responded to kindness. Doors opened for those who helped others. Portraits whispered advice to nervous first years. The hat's songs became longer, richer, and its wisdom deeper than ever before. Even the ghosts seemed brighter, their forms clearer and more alive. And yet, amid the light, subtle signs of something ancient stirred again. One evening, while tending the gardens, Neville found a stone in the soil, smooth, round, etched with faint runes that glowed green in the twilight. When he touched it, warmth spread through his palm, and for an instant he heard a voice, neither man nor woman, but something vast and calm. "Guard what was given." The stone crumbled into dust. He took the matter to Hermione, who examined the fragments by candlelight. "These symbols," she murmured, tracing the faint grooves with her wand, "belong to the Founder's oldest warding spells. It's as if the castle is planting them, recreating the original protections layer by layer." "Why?" Neville asked. "To prepare," she said softly. "Prepare for what?" She had no answer. Weeks passed, and the castle grew stranger still. Staircases shifted with uncanny precision, leading students away from mischief or danger before it even began. Windows opened to let in sunlight on cold mornings, and the suits of armor moved without command, dusting their own halls. Then came the night, when the stars vanished. It happened without warning. One moment the sky above the great hall sparkled with its usual constellations. The next, darkness swallowed them whole. The enchanted ceiling turned blank, a void without light or depth. gasps filled the hall as students looked upward in confusion. Professor McGonagall rose from the staff table, her voice calm but firm. "Remain seated. This may be—" But she stopped, for beneath the ceiling the air shimmered with golden light. A single figure appeared, translucent, radiant, the ghostly image of Alaric Storm. The students fell silent. Hermione's breath caught. "He's speaking through the castle again." Alaric's voice echoed through the hall, soft but carrying to every corner. "Fear not. The darkness above is not an omen, but a reminder. The sky changes as all things must. Hogwarts stands eternal, but its heart must be kept true." Neville rose slowly. "What does that mean?" The figure turned its gaze toward him, eyes glowing like sunlight through water. "It means the castle is more than walls and memory. It is choice. Every act within its halls shapes it, good or ill." The vision wavered. Alaric's form flickered like a candle flame. "Guard its heart, Neville Longbottom. Guard it well." Then the light faded and the stars returned as if nothing had changed. But everything had. After that night, whispers spread among the students. Rumors that the castle itself was watching more closely than ever, that it guided them, protected them, tested them. Some said they saw Alaric's shadow walking the corridors by moonlight. Others claimed to hear the founders' voices in the rustle of parchment or the wind through the halls. Neville, for his part, could not shake the feeling that something vast and unseen had awakened fully within the stone. When he closed his eyes, he felt the pulse of it, the rhythm of the castle's heart, strong, unbroken, alive. Hermione believed it was hope. "Hogwarts is no longer a place," she said one evening as they watched the sunset from the courtyard. "It's a living memory of every act of courage and kindness that's ever happened within its walls. That's why it endures." Neville looked out across the grounds where students laughed beside the lake, and he smiled. Then maybe it doesn't need guarding after all. Maybe it guards us. That night, as the moon rose over the towers, the Sorting Hat sang once more, not for a ceremony, but to itself, a tune soft as the turning of pages. From fire, from stone, from heart and hand, the school was born to heal the land. Through storm and night, through loss and pain, the flame of hope shall rise again. The candles flickered, and for a heartbeat, the hat's brim curved like a smile. Deep below, in the chamber of foundations, the runes glowed gently, red for bravery, blue for wisdom, yellow for loyalty, green for renewal. The sword of Alaric Storm gleamed faintly in its place, and the castle murmured around it like a living creature at rest. And as the night settled over the highlands, a soft voice, neither ghost nor echo, but the very soul of Hogwarts, whispered through the corridors. "Guardians may fade, but the heart endures." The torches burned low, the wind sighed across the stones, and Hogwarts, ever ancient, ever young, dreamed on. Autumn swept across the Scottish hills like a painter's brush, gilding the forests in bronze and fire. The towers of Hogwarts rose through the drifting mists, proud and eternal, their windows glowing against the early dusk. The great lake mirrored the reddening sky, disturbed only by the faint ripples of the giant squid. It was a season of quiet magic, harvest and remembrance, endings and beginnings. Neville Longbottom stood among the pumpkins near Hagrid's old hut, the scent of damp earth and smoke in the air. He was older now, though still young by wizarding years. The silver in his hair glimmered faintly beneath the evening light. The years since Alaric's sacrifice had passed in peace, and yet, as the leaves fell, he He could feel the castle stirring again, like an old tree dreaming of storms. Students' laughter echoed faintly across the lawns. They were carefree, untouched by the struggles that had once scarred these grounds. Neville was glad of that. Still, sometimes he caught himself watching the castle walls, waiting for the faint shimmer of light or whisper of a voice that had not spoken in years. He carried the sorting hat beneath his arm as he walked up to the castle. It had insisted upon a walk as it sometimes did, claiming the fresh air kept its mind supple. "I tell you, Professor," it said from under his elbow, "this new generation's far too well behaved. Where's the spirit, the mischief, the raw edge of curiosity?" Neville chuckled softly. "We've had enough of that to last a lifetime." "Perhaps, but courage grows dull without challenge. The school lives on trial and triumph alike." Neville looked toward the towers. "There'll always be challenges, but I think for now Hogwarts deserves its peace." The hat gave a low hum of thought. "Peace is never still, my boy. It shifts like water. Even now the castle dreams of what comes next." He frowned. "What do you mean, what comes next?" But the hat only chuckled and fell silent. Later that evening, the first frost silvered the windows. The students gathered in the Great Hall for the Feast of Founders, a tradition born after the war when the four houses had agreed to celebrate unity rather than rivalry. Banners of scarlet, green, blue, and gold hung side by side, their colors mingling in the candlelight. Hermione, now headmistress of Hogwarts, stood at the dais. Her voice carried through the hall, calm and clear. "Tonight we honor those who built this school and those who protected it through the ages. Remember, each house bears a piece of the same soul. The strength of Hogwarts lies not in difference, but in harmony." The students cheered. Neville, sitting among his colleagues, smiled with quiet pride. It was her way of saying that Alaric Storm's sacrifice would never be forgotten, even if his name passed into legend. After the feast, when the hall had emptied, Neville lingered behind. He walked slowly toward the head table where the hat still sat, its brim tilted in contentment. "You were quiet tonight," he said. "I was listening," murmured the hat. "There's music in their voices again. The Founders would be proud." Neville nodded. They should be. He was about to turn away when a faint vibration shuddered through the floor. It was soft, like a sigh, but it made the candle flames quiver. The hat stiffened. "Oh dear," it murmured. "That's the old magic stirring again." Neville's heart tightened. "The chamber?" "Deeper," said the hat gravely. "The castle's heart beats slower now, but it beats still. When its pulse changes, something answers." Hermione appeared at the door, drawn by the flickering light. "Did you feel that?" Neville nodded. "The hat thinks something's moving beneath us." Her eyes darkened with memory. "I'll check the runes." They went together through the familiar tunnels, their wands casting long beams of light along the damp stone. The air was cold and sharp, with the scent of old earth. When they entered the Chamber of Foundations, a hush fell over them. It was beautiful still, the marble floor etched with runes that glowed faintly in 4 colors. The sword of Alaric Storm lay embedded in the center, untouched by dust or time. Yet tonight, the glow had changed. The serpent's rune, the mark of Slytherin, shone brightest, its green light rippling across the others like waves upon still water. Hermione knelt beside it, tracing the edge of the rune with her wand. "It's not corruption," she whispered. "It's resonance." The castle's absorbing more of his power. Neville frowned. Can that be dangerous? Not if the balance holds, but if one house grows too strong. She didn't finish. They both knew what that could mean. The hat spoke softly from where it rested on Neville's arm. The serpent dreams. It does not wake. Do not disturb it, and it will guard the school as Alaric intended. Neville exhaled slowly. Then we leave it be. But as they turned to go, the air trembled. A faint whisper rose from the sword itself, low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Then words. Guardians may fade, but the circle remains. Hermione froze. It's him. Neville's eyes widened. Alaric? The whisper grew stronger, a breath of wind swirling around them. The castle endures, but every age must forge its own unity. Watch the young. They will shape the next song. Then the light dimmed and silence returned. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Hermione smiled faintly. He's still watching over us. Neville nodded. Always. They sealed the chamber and returned to the surface. Outside, the night was clear and bright with stars. The lake shimmered like glass, and the moon hung over it like a silver coin. From the tower above, a faint melody drifted through the air, the hat singing quietly to itself. Stone remembers, and so does flame. Time may change, but hearts remain. From four we came, from four we stand, bound forever by one hand. Neville looked toward the lights of the castle windows, warm and golden against the dark. Somewhere within, the laughter of children echoed down the halls. Every age its own unity, he murmured. I suppose that's his way of saying our work's never done. Hermione smiled. And perhaps that's the point. They stood a while longer, watching as the owls rose from the owlery, their wings catching the moonlight. The world was calm once more, but alive with unseen magic, the promise of new beginnings. And deep below the earth, in the Chamber of Foundations, the sword's runes gleamed softly. A green light pulsed in harmony with the red, blue, and gold. The serpent did not wake, but it dreamed peacefully, protectively, of a castle eternal and the courage of those who would always call it home. Winter returned once more to the highlands, draping the hills in white and silver. The wind sighed through the battlements of Hogwarts, carrying with it the sound of chimes from the distant village of Hogsmeade. Snow dusted the great hall windows, muffling the laughter of students gathered near the fire. Beneath the warm light of floating candles, the castle seemed timeless again, strong, proud, and alive. Years had passed since Alaric Storm's sacrifice. His story was now legend, told in whispers to new students who half believed it and half did not. But those who had stood with him, Hermione, Neville, and the professors who had seen the war, knew better. They could still feel his presence in the air, a faint shimmer of strength that bound every stone and flame together. Neville Longbottom, now headmaster, had grown into the role with quiet grace. His hair was streaked with gray, and lines marked his brow, yet his eyes still held that same steady courage. He carried the hat with him wherever he went, for it had become something more than an artifact. It was the living voice of the school itself, wiser now than ever before. One twilight evening, as snow began to fall again, Neville sat alone in his office. The fire crackled softly, casting golden light upon the shelves of worn books and enchanted herbs. The hat rested on the desk before him, its brim half folded like an old man in thought. "Quiet night," Neville murmured, sipping tea from a mug that steamed gently. "For now," said the hat. Its tone had deepened over the years, mellow and wise. "The castle sleeps lightly these days. It dreams of change again. Neville smiled faintly. Change never ends, does it? Nor should it. Hogwarts is no monument, Neville Longbottom. It's a mirror. It becomes what the world needs. He leaned back in his chair. And what does it need now? The hat was silent for a time, the fire popping softly in the hearth. Then it said, "New guardians. You've kept the flame, as did those before you. But the circle must always renew itself." Neville nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same. There are students here, remarkable ones, braver than they know. Then it's time to teach them what guardianship truly means," the hat replied. Snow tapped against the windows, gentle as breath. Neville looked out toward the distant lake, its surface frozen and gleaming under the moon. "You think the old magic will stir again?" The hat gave a sound that might have been a chuckle. "It never sleeps, headmaster. It only waits." The next morning dawned bright and pale. The students bustled through the corridors, their boots squeaking on polished stone. Classes resumed as always. Transfiguration charms, potions. But under the surface, a quiet excitement spread. Rumors said Headmaster Longbottom was forming something new, something older than any club or society. He made the announcement that evening in the great hall. The air shimmered with curiosity as he stood beneath the banners of the 4 houses, the sorting hat at his side. Hogwarts was founded, Neville said, not only to teach but to protect, to be a refuge of knowledge and courage when the world outside forgot such things. That duty has passed from the founders to each generation that followed. Now it is time to pass it to you. A murmur ran through the hall. "I am forming an order," Neville continued, "a circle of students chosen not by blood or brilliance, but by heart. You will study the founder's magic, the binding runes, the history of the school's soul. You will learn what it means to guard something greater than yourselves." He looked across the faces before him, wide-eyed first years, skeptical 7th years, and teachers who watched in silence. "This is not a call to battle," he said. "It is a call to stewardship." The hat stirred on the stool beside him, and its voice echoed through the hall. "The guardians of Hogwarts shall rise anew. 4 shall be chosen each year, 1 from every house. Together they will keep the circle strong." The hall erupted with whispers, but amid the noise 4 students felt the hat's gaze settle upon them. A Gryffindor girl with fire-bright hair, a Ravenclaw boy whose eyes shimmered with curiosity, a Hufflepuff student, quiet as snowfall but steady as the earth, and a Slytherin whose calm, thoughtful stare hinted at an unspoken depth. They stepped forward, drawn not by ambition, but by something older and deeper, the castle itself, calling to them. Neville raised his wand. "Then it begins." Light flared from the hat, spiraling upward in ribbons of red, blue, gold, and green. The runes of the great hall glowed faintly beneath the tables, and somewhere deep below, the chamber of foundations answered with a heartbeat of light. The sword of Alaric Storm gleamed for the first time in years, its blade reflecting the magic above. When the brilliance faded, the hall was silent. The 4 chosen stood with hands clasped, their expressions solemn yet alight with wonder. Hermione, standing among the teachers, smiled faintly. "The founders would be proud," she murmured. "They already are," said the hat, its voice a whisper only she could hear. Winter deepened, but the days that followed were full of quiet purpose. The new guardians studied under Neville's guidance, learning the old runes, the language of enchantments, and the history that bound their houses together. They worked side by side, discovering friendship where rivalry had once lived. And as they learned, Hogwarts changed again. The castle seemed to glow warmer, its corridors safer, its magic more harmonious. The 4 relics, the cup, the diadem, the sword, and the hat resonated softly in unison, their power balanced and whole. One night after the first snowfall of the new year, Neville led the Guardians to the Chamber of Foundations. The runes shimmered beneath their feet, the air alive with ancient energy. He placed his hand upon the hilt of Alaric's sword and said, "Remember this place, not as a prison or a tomb, but as a promise. What was sealed in darkness now guards the light." The youngest Guardian, the Hufflepuff girl, spoke timidly. "Do you think he can hear us, sir?" Neville smiled. "I know he can." The runes pulsed once, slow and steady, and a voice filled the air, soft like wind through leaves. "The circle holds." They left the chamber in silence, the glow of its magic warming their steps. Above, the castle slept beneath a quilt of snow. The owls dreamed in their perches, and the stars blazed bright and cold. Deep within the hat's weave, the faintest whisper stirred, a song yet unwritten, waiting for the next age to begin. And in that timeless hush, as dawn crept over the mountains, Hogwarts endured, living, breathing, eternal. Its spirit was the courage of those who guarded it, its heart the unity of all who called it home. For as long as wands would raise and candles burn, the story of the wizard whose soul was sealed within the Sorting Hat and the countless hearts who followed would never fade.